Boyce and Hart, Harry Nielsen, Paul Williams, Neil Sedaka, all these incredible writers, and the writers and the producers, Boyce and Hart especially, who were so responsible for the early sound of the Monkees, which is what producers do. They help craft the sound of the act, and so you gotta understand, and the little baby over there.
Monkees fans. Well, before I continue on, we definitely have some people lined up, so yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I was wondering who designed the Monkees guitar logo.
I have no idea. And I've tried to find that out over the years. It would have been an art director at Columbia Screen, well, at the time it was called Screen Gems Television. And it was run by Jackie Cooper, the actor. And he's the one that commissioned the pilot and made the deal for the original development of the show from Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider. And I've never been able to find out. It would have been somebody in the art department. I do remember that the original script, I still have it, the pilot script, before they cast it, was spelled without the two E's. It was spelled just Monkeys.
Wow.
Yeah, and some business affairs lawyer at Screen Gems must have said, you got to do something to change that, or else you're never going to be able to trademark it and copyright it. You have to change it up. And that's when they must have come up with the two E's. Then they could copyright it and trademark it. And it would have been some guy in the art department at Screen Gems that came up with it, and it was just a hired hand, and that's all I know.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And it is truly one of the most lasting, imprints or logos that.
Iconograph.
Yeah, it's really iconic.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's a great logo.
Because I would say, it's probably arguably within the top 5, if not top 3, of logos of bands. Whether it's
I'll bet.
Jackson 5, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, definitely the Monkees.
That guitar.
Yes.
Whoever that guy was or girl, I don't know who it was.
Yeah. Shout out to you.
It's very cool.
Absolutely.
Hello, I know you've done a lot of theater, and I was wondering if that's something that you would like to continue to do, and if so, if there's a specific role or play that you would be most interested in doing.
Sorry, I've done a lot of theater. What I would like to do more in theater?
Yes.
Yeah, I have done a lot of theater. I love it. I would love to do more. I've been up for a couple things, and for different reasons, it didn't work out. Boy, there's so many roles that I would like to do. I think the wizard in Wicked is one of them, and we've talked about that. Gosh, when I was younger, I would have loved to do Billy Flynn in Chicago. I'm obviously too old for that now, but Mr. Cellophane in Chicago. I actually do in my cabaret show. I do Mr. Cellophane from Chicago. And I don't know. I did Hairspray, and I played Wilbur, the dad. I'd love to do Tracy. A little stretch.
A little. But you have the range.
You have the range. I don't have the big suit thing.
We can get that.
We can do that. I actually was offered Frankenfurter in Rocky Horror Picture Show. I thought about it. I read it. I did. I've seen it many times, and I just don't see myself in the fishnet tights.
Well, now we all do, though.
I was offered it in London, actually, and I just can't see myself in that yet. Actually, in Hairspray, they talked about me doing Edna, actually, at one point.
Wow.
And again, I just can't see myself doing that. I'd be doing sort of a caricature thing. The Ednas I've worked with, incredible actors, and so I don't see myself in that. I love doing Wilbur. I did that for a year in England, in the West End, and then on the national tour. But I would love to do some more theater. I'm always looking out for it. Thank you.
Hello. This is another question about acting, basically. I wanted to, you were in Halloween, or remake of Rob Zombie.
Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Yeah. Would you ever do another horror movie?
Well, if Rob Zombie was direct, it depends on the role. I'll do any acting movie job, but it always depends on the role and the script. I just did an episode of Difficult People, the Amy Poehler produced show out of New York, and I played myself, and I usually don't do that, but it was such a wonderful evil version of myself. I don't know if you heard of the show called Difficult People. It's a very cute show, but weird, and I play a very evil version of myself, which is fun. So
that's basically what I was wondering, like if you do a villain or something, if you could.
Oh, I love doing
that would
villains.
be-
Always loved. In Halloween, I not a villain. I wasn't a villain, but I wasn't, Micky Dolenz the monkey. I was a guy running a gun shop.
Right.
And in Aida, the Elton John Tim Rice musical I did for a whole year on Broadway and on the tour, I was the villain. I was Zoser, which was the evil father of the hero, and he was a really nasty guy. And any actor will tell you, it's so much more fun playing the bad guy. Because in real life, you don't really have a chance, or you get arrested. Playing the hero in a film is always more difficult, too. The villain's easier because you hide behind this facade and makeup or something, and you can really turn it on. I have great admiration for, like, Keanu Reeves, for instance. Everybody sometimes, trashes him. It is so difficult to play the good guy. Because there's no range, you don't, you're the victim usually, you're just like taking it, you're like getting beat up, and you don't have that evil range of stuff. But anybody that, playing the good guy is very, very difficult. And it's much easier to play the bad guy.
Just let it go. There it is. Whatever. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you for coming here.
That's awesome.
I've always been a fan of offbeat comedy, and
She wants out.
Monkees growing up was one of my favorite shows. What was your favorite offbeat comedy bit from the TV show?
Well, I can tell you who my, prototypes were, who influenced me comically. Would have been Red Skelton, Danny Kaye, those iconic, iconographic, 50s comedy, people. I'm trying to think of, the Donald Connor, the Marx Brothers, I guess. That kind of, those kind of comedians. Not any particular, show I can think of necessarily, but even Jackie Gleason, the old school Jerry Lewis, big time. Those would have been the comics or comedians. And there's a difference between a comic and a comedian. A comic says funny things, a comedian says things funny. Interesting distinction.
That needs to go on a t-shirt.
That needs to go on a t-shirt. Be patting that.
But it's an interesting distinction. And like I said, Red Skelton would have been a huge influence, on me. And thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Originally, the show started out as a...
Can you get closer to the mic there?
Sorry. Originally, the show started out as a series, correct?
Mhm.
When did you start recording?
Well, the history of the Monkees, without getting too detailed, the Monkees was a television show. It was a series, a sitcom. But right from the get-go, they must have had in mind, and it was about, like I said before, it was about this imaginary group. The closest thing that's come along is like Glee, which is a television show about imaginary glee club. But they must have had in mind from the get-go to record and to perform, because they wouldn't have bothered to hire people that could sing, right? Well, in the case of the Monkees, the same thing applied. they would not have bothered to hire guys that could sing and play. That was part of the audition process. You had to be able to sing and play, besides acting, besides comedy, besides personality, besides all the other things that make up casting, say, a regular sitcom. They obviously had in mind that they were going to try, if the show got on the air even, that the act, the four guys, would sing and play on records and live, because part of the audition process was singing and playing. My audition piece was Johnny Be Good.
That's right.
By Chuck Berry, the late great Chuck Berry.
Yes.
Everybody had to sing and play. You couldn't get anywhere near the final auditions without doing that. And it wasn't like American Idol auditions. This is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a soundstage with like 3 fat electricians, sitting around, no audience or anything.
When did you catch?
So immediately, as soon as the pilot sold, we were in the studio. And I was doing most of the lead vocals. I don't know why. They just decided I was the voice, for the theme song and for the first singles and stuff. And David also, of course, was singing some of the leads. Mike was on the first album playing, writing a song with Carole King, Sweet Young Thing. And gradually, the story, we didn't have much control in the early days. And we didn't have any control at all about what was being recorded or who was singing what or who was writing what or what was being released. I had no clue about what the first album looked like until I got a copy at all. We had no input into the artwork or the songs, the routineng of the album, nothing, absolutely nothing. And then eventually we fought for the right to have some control. We won, and a wonderful album came out of that called Headquarters, which was one of my favorite. And so we started recording immediately as soon as the show sold as a series, because it piloted, and we didn't know when if it was going to sell. Most pilots did not sell. In fact, that year I was up as an actor-singer for 4 different music shows.
Wow.
Yeah, it was in the air. People were trying to capitalize on the youth music, Beatles, folk music, the whole music scene. One was a show about a folk band, a Peter, Paul, and Mary kind of folk group. It was called The Happeners, I remember, and I was up for it. I didn't get the part in the pilot. It did go to pilot, but did not sell. Another one, I don't remember the name, was like a Beach Boy surfing band show. It did not go to pilot. It didn't, or no, it may have gone to pilot, but it didn't sell. I'm not even sure it went to pilot. Another one was like a big New Christie Minstrels, Randy Spark, Mighty Wind, that movie. Yeah, big fan, that 30-piece folk band. I don't think it went to pilot or sold. That's right, those did, the Happeners, the Peter, Paul, and Mary thing did go to pilot, but did not sell. So it was in the air, and then there was the Monkees. And it was the same part of the same pilot season. And it did go to pilot, obviously, and it sold.
Yes, it did.
Barely sold.
Really?
Yeah, barely sold. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello.
With all the reboots that are going on with movies and TV shows, if they did a reboot of the Monkees, who would you like to see play you or any of the other band members?
They did try that. They did in '86 when we had a huge reunion.
You played here.
Biggest tour of anybody that year.
That's right.
Was the Monkee reunion. No accounting for taste. The producers of the original show thought they'd be very clever and jump on the bandwagon and do a new Monkees, and it was called the New Monkees. They asked me to direct the pilot, and they wanted us to hand over the baton, as it were, they weren't playing us. It was new characters. They weren't renamed Micky, Davy, but they wanted us to hand over the baton to the new generation And we're selling out 10,000.
Around to get rid of this.
And we have a hit record, you know. And we're like, screw you. We're not handing the baton to anybody. And we won this race. We're not handing the baton. I felt sorry for the kids that were roped into that because it was really bad. It was not very good. They asked me they called me in late in the day to try and, I think, salvage it because I was directing at the time a lot, and I directed on the Monkees. And will you come and direct the pilot? I was like, forget it. You know, the script was really bad, and those poor kids. I mean, I remember once, a couple of years later, only a few years later, I was in a restaurant, and the waiter comes over and he takes my order and he says, by the way, I played you on the series. It only lasted like 6 episodes or something, and I felt bad. You know, the thing is, and not because we were anything that special, you know, the show was very unique, and you put all those elements together, and like one of the producers said, you just caught lightning in a bottle. But you can't just go and like put pointed ears on somebody and call him Mr. Spock. I mean, you can when you make him younger. Right, you know, on a prequel. But you can't just say, oh, somebody else is going to be Leonard Nimoy now. It just doesn't work, you know. And in any show, in any kind of a situation, you got to be very, very careful when you're trying to do that stuff. Then there was what do you call it? It was Daydream Believers, a special that they did, the story of, more like a documentary. That was okay. I thought they did a pretty good job. So, you know, I don't think it's not going to happen. They could do they've tried other shows, not called the Monkees, but other shows for those young guys or girls out, you know, trying to be famous. But I think the biggest mistake they make is that the people on the show are already famous.
Right.
And so there's nowhere to go.
Right.
They're just like, they're already famous and wonderful and lovely and beautiful, and everybody's perfect and gorgeous. And we were not perfect and gorgeous, maybe except for Davey. He might have been perfect and gorgeous, but we certainly weren't, you know, the other 3 of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Exactly.
So who are some of your favorite guest stars?
Favorite
Guest stars?
on the show?
On the show.
Oh boy, that was wonderful. Hans Conried, Rosemarie, Stan Freberg, one of my favorite. That's, you know, funnily enough, people ask me, do you remember that episode when you, I'm like, no. No clue. But I remember the people, a lot of the people that were on the show. Because we filmed them back to back. It was every 3 days. And it all is like one big episode to me.
Were people trying to get on to be guest stars on the Monkees, or were they?
I don't know. That's a good question. I wasn't there producing, so I don't know. I suspect when it became a hit, a big hit show, at the beginning, Jerry Colonna was in one of the very early episodes. I don't know. I should think early on, other actors were probably a bit leery. The network was leery. Like I mentioned, it almost didn't get on the air. The network was scared to death. Really, I've heard about putting 4 long-haired kids unmonitored, you know, unsupervised, 4 young guys with long hair and bell-bottoms. In '66, the only time you saw kids with long hair and bell-bottoms, they were being arrested on TV or shot. And so the network, I understand, was very leery of putting a show on where A, you have these young hippie kids, and B, they were unsupervised, which you didn't usually have. There was My Favorite Stupid Uncle, or My Father, his father's My 3 Sons. You always had the adult figure. And interestingly enough, little side story, the pilot had an adult figure in it originally. It was the manager. And if you look at the pilot, he's still in like one scene at the record store. But he was supposed to be the father figure. He was the adult, sensible father figure, uncle, who would guide us and, well, boys, I think you should, blah, 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 blah. And he was in the show. And the pilot did not test well with kids, because that was the age of, there was a lot of revolution going on, especially amongst the young generation. And we're the young generation. So Bob Rafelson, in his wisdom, took out that manager part, took out as much as he could and still make the show work. And he added the personality, our interviews, a lot of our original audition interviews to give us some, the kids were saying, we don't know who's who. So he put in those audition pieces, some of them, took out the manager, and it sold. Then it tested much, much better, and it ended up selling, obviously. So, you never know.
Awesome.
And did you guys have much in the way of corporate censorship over what you were doing?
Oh, huge.
Because like you would hear stories about what Gene Roddenberry could and couldn't do in Star Trek. What were some of the things you couldn't do in the Monkees?
Oh, well, anything political, heavily. I mean, Clarksville wasn't anti-war, not anti-war, but it was about a soldier going off to boot camp.
Right.
Yeah, so they let that through. On the show, nothing heavily political but that wasn't what it was about. It wasn't, but we didn't want to, and the producers didn't want to. That's one of the reasons it stands up, is the show, is the humor wasn't topical or satirical. Whereas a show like Laugh-In, which was a great show, I loved it to death. But if you didn't read the news that week, you wouldn't get what they were talking about. Like SNL. If you weren't watching the news or paying attention, you wouldn't know what SNL was talking about. Similar kind of thing. So they wisely, the humor was not satirical, and it wasn't topical. It had nothing to do with the time and place, or in politics, or anything social, really. Or it was like the Marx Brothers, and that's the reason that stands up, or I Love Lucy, or and the other thing was that, again, it was about this struggle, for success. And what was I going to say? There was something else about that. What was your question originally?
What were some of the restrictions that you may have had to deal with?
The censorship thing, yeah. So it wasn't about that, and we didn't try to, force the issue. There were some times when the censors, the New York NBC censors, did change a word or two. The most famous story that I remember is we did an episode called The Devil and Peter Tork, and it was basically Faust, the Faustian legend, like damn monkeys, or damn Yankees, or damn monkeys. Peter sold his soul to the devil to be able to play the harp. That was the story. It's Faust.
I remember that.
And so he comes back to the pad and says, "Oh, I can play the harp. How'd you do that?" "Well, I signed this contract, in fire." And we're like, "You sold your soul to the devil." "Well, I bet I can play the harp." "Yeah, but Peter, that means when you die, you're going to go to hell." And the censor, that was in the script, in the original script. Censors said, "You can't say the word hell on network television at 7:30 on a Monday night." And we were like, "What?" It's like, it's Faust, for God's sake. And Bob Rafelson, I understand, went ballistic, and he flew to New York, I think, even, or something. And there was a story that he fought and fought and fought to be able to say the word hell on television, out of Faust, for goodness sake. And they said no. So in the episode, I don't remember word for word, but if you watch the episode, I think I'm the one that says, "Peter, if you die, you're going to go to that place we can't say on network television." It was very strict, very strict. But again, I'm just saying, it wasn't about that. We weren't there to do that, The thing about the Monkees was, Timothy Leary said in his book, Politics of Ecstasy, I don't know what you think of Timothy Leary, but he wasn't a stupid guy. He says the Monkees brought long hair into the living room. And that's essentially one of the heritage, and I think that'll be remembered. We made it okay to be a young kid and wear long hair and have bell bottoms. You weren't committing crimes against nature. It was okay. Mom, look, those are the Monkees. They have long hair and they wear J.C. Penney's bell bottoms. but they're okay. They're not,
They're trying to be
rioting
successful.
in a similar way that Henry Winkler did with Fonz in Happy Days, which I was up for, by the way.
You were too tall for that, right?
It was between me and him.
Yeah, and I heard that you were ruled as too tall because you're taller
Yes.
than Ron Howard.
Yeah, I heard that, but I think Henry Winkler was much better. I would have been pretending I was the, hey, what? He was the Fonz. But he made it okay to wear a leather jacket.
Right.
And have greased back hair and talk like that. And you weren't Marlon Brando and what was called Wild Ones, yeah. And you were a gangster, thug. Same way Will Smith made it okay to be a young black dude singing rap music. It didn't mean you were a gangster. It didn't mean you were some criminal. He made it okay to do that. And so kids go, hey, why can't I just, be a nice kid and sing rap? And the Monkees did that, in the 60s to long-haired weirdos, basically.
We're not all bad.
Yeah, and the kids, because all the kids aren't bad. They aren't. And they just want to pick up on the new thing and just, have fun and maybe come into your town.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think I speak for everybody here. Thank you for all the years of the Monkees and everything else you've done, and for coming here to Des Moines.
Yeah. Woo! Woo!
You mentioned Ron Howard, and I know that historically, child actors sometimes can be very successful, and then just nothing happens after that. I remember you from Circus Boy.
Right.
How much did Circus Boy influence the rest of your career and help you to get into being the Monkees and come on from there?
Well, the short story is I was born into a showbiz family. My mom and dad were both actors and singers, so I grew up in that world. I did stuff before Circus Boy. Actually, I did a couple of screen tests. I think a couple of little things before Circus Boy. My father was an actor, and his agent must have, said, "You think Mickey wants to, do something?" I don't even remember when the first thing I did. I have some prenatal work coming out on ultrasound. Yeah, high def ultrasound. In the fetal position. So it's all I remember. It's all I knew. I thought everybody's father was an actor. I did a screen test at like 6 years old for a movie. It never got made, but I remember doing that. So Circus Boy came around. I almost didn't go to the audition. I had a baseball game that day. But I had been going to audition. And there was no pressure. My parents were like, my mom was like stage mom, eyes and teeth, honey, eyes and teeth. They were very down to earth, very down home. My father was off the boat from Italy, so he didn't take any crap. And my mom was a hard-working actress until she started having kids. And so it was a real, not your typical Hollywood Beverly Hills kind of Hollywood family. We lived out I was born on a chicken ranch in the valley and grew up. My father, we had horses, and we lived on, that rural, very rural lifestyle. And I had to, feed the horses and clean the pool, even during Circus Boy. So there was no crap, you had to be real. And after Circus Boy, I was offered another show, they told me in later years. Cabin Boy, it was called, and it was a series like a kid on one of those, like, what's that famous book?
Like Tom Sawyer?
No, a ship, the kid.
Oh,
Cabin Boy and the
Treasure
Island. Treasure Island. The Cabin Boy. That was going to be my next show, and they turned it down. My parents said, "No, we're taking him out of it," because they sent me to what they told me was an educational counselor, but really it was a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, after Circus Boy. And I remember doing the Rorschach tests and stuff, and I guess he must have said, "He is crazy. You must take him out of this business immediately." And they did. They took me out, and the next day I was at public school in the San Fernando Valley, my bleach blonde hair growing out, pinned up against the wall by the little kids going, "Wow, you're Circus Boy, eh?" And I had to just get back into real life really quick. And they took me out of the business very wisely, because a roundabout way of getting an answer, answering your question, that's the part of being a child star that messes you up, is after the success. Because you're going into puberty, it's tough enough to be going to puberty for anybody, right? Much less as a has-been, you know, and as like, they don't love me anymore, I'm not cute anymore, you know, and going to, and failing auditions and not getting the part, and suddenly you're no longer cute and lovable and adorable, you're a growing up, lanky, gacky, you know, acne teenager.
You just described my entire upbringing.
That's the hard part, and that is when, from my experience, what I know from my peers, and my friend Paul Peterson, who has a wonderful organization called, I'll think of it. He helps young child stars try to make it through a transition, or if they're having a problem or something like that. Because Paul Peterson was a child star in the Donna Reed show, and he has a wonderful organization, which I can't remember the name. That's the hard part. You know, you're going through puberty, you're a cute little 10, 12-year-old, and then suddenly you're going in to be a teenager, and you're already a has-been. Your show's canceled, and what do you do then? You're too old for the young parts, you're too young for the old parts. And so my parents wisely, I guess with the help maybe of the psychiatrist, said, get him out, and they did. And I went back to school until after high school, and it was after high school that I started to drift back into doing guest shots on TV shows, mainly just for summer money. Mr. Novak, Peyton Place, but I was just doing it for the bucks, frankly. And you know, I decided I was going to be an architect, and I needed a real life, a real job. My father passed away, and I was going to. My friend and I said, we both like building stuff. Let's be architects. Get architectural drafting, start a little remodeling architectural business. And I was like, cool, that is great, because I love doing that stuff. And so I was in college doing little guest shots on TV shows, and I was going to be an architect. If I couldn't make it as an architect, I was going to fall back on showbiz. I'm serious.
I think it worked out for all of us, I'm sure.
And then all of a sudden the Monkee pilot came along. I wasn't stupid. I knew what a television series could do. My agent said, you want to go for the pilot? I could have easily said, no, I got a test. He said, you want to go for, audition on Thursday? Sorry, I can't. I got a finals or something, But I did.